Welcome to this week's episode of Friends of Kayla. This is a really exciting, more educational episode today, unlike what I typically do, but I think it's really important as a former New York resident myself. Definitely been very interested in understanding a little bit more about the most recent primary mayoral election and what Jewish voters specifically can understand and take away from the primaries as they get ready to vote in November. So today we have a guest, Zach, with us, who's a Democratic political advisor to business leaders and philanthropists. He also ran for Congress in the state of New York at the age of 29. And today he's personally just passionate about addressing anti-Semitism in American politics. So really excited to welcome Zach today. And we are in New York City. So it's great to be here, Zach.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yes, very excited. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that brief bio, but would love to just learn a little bit more about you and why you agreed to chat with me today.
Well, I think right now, as a young Jewish person in democratic politics, really in America at large, who considers himself a Zionist, we're struggling with all these various identities and how to navigate carrying those various identities. And that really came to light for many folks in the wake of the recent mayoral election here in New York City. For me, over the past 5 years, I've been focused on countering political extremism. I felt like when I got started, most of my work was focused on countering right-wing extremism, which I felt like as an American was the greatest threat to our democracy. Over the past about 2 years, though, I've also started to notice a rise in anti-Semitic extremism on the left. And as a Jewish person, I've really begun to also spend some of my time trying to counter that. I want to note, there is anti-Semitic extremism on the right too, but here in New York City, where 70% of registered voters are Democrats, our city's politics are dominated by the left. And over the past couple of years, I've been really focused on taking on an organization in New York politics called the Democratic Socialists of America. In 1982, they were formed as a merger between two socialist organizations that effectively came out of the Vietnam War movement. And what's interesting about the Democratic Socialists of America at the time is that they promoted a two-state solution. And that generally lasted until about 2017. What's also interesting in the lead up to 2017 is that they basically had stagnant membership, around 5,000 members all across the country from 1982 to 2017. And then what happened in 2017 is in the wake of Bernie Sanders' campaign for president as a Democratic Socialist, but not a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, a lot of left-wing folks who would consider themselves more radical than the Democratic Party decided to create a home for themselves in the Democratic Socialists of America. And what happened in that moment, though, was that groups like Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace really began to use the DSA as a means for their anti-Zionist stances that they saw as aligned with pursuing their socialist agenda. You know, this whole concept of intersectionality, that's basically what they were pushing for. And that led to the Democratic Socialists of America in 2017 becoming the largest political organization in America to call for BDS. Boycott, divest, sanctions, which, by the way, is something that Bernie Sanders doesn't even call for because he thinks it delegitimizes the state of Israel. And over the years, we saw AOC get elected and now likely have a presumptive mayor in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, who we'll probably talk a little bit about here today.
Exactly. Yes, I definitely want to talk about Mamdani specifically and really just why people should even care about who our mayor is. I think the media really just covers the presidential election, and obviously we see extremism in social media and because of the massive coverage of the presidential election. But I think at the state level, no one really knows, or even the city level, how that can impact them on their day-to-day. And debatably, that's probably more impactful on us as New Yorkers, or myself, a former New Yorker, of what that can really do for us as a resident in this city. So I think what I really want to understand from you, Zach, is why we should care and who we should be voting for this November.
Well, as Jewish people, New York City has the second largest Jewish population of any city in the world outside of Tel Aviv. And so this city obviously has a significant impact on the Jewish population, not just in New York City, but across the world. And I think what's important to note about the mayor here in New York City is, it's fair to outline some of their responsibilities. Yeah. And I think some of the most relevant responsibilities that a mayor carries as it relates to the Jewish community is their ability to appoint the head of the NYPD, and the head of New York City Public Schools, as long as there's mayoral control, which has existed since Mike Bloomberg was mayor of New York City. And of late, we've heard rumors after Mamdani won the primary that he was considering appointing former Congressman Jamal Bowman to lead New York City Public Schools. Now, this is someone who, in the aftermath of October 7th, said that reports of sexual violence was a form of propaganda. And when you look at leadership in New York City, you're seeing people who not only have responsibility over our safety, over how people are educated, but you're also looking at people who will have a bully pulpit, who can affirm extremist ideologies, who could promote extremist ideologies, and in a worst case scenario, actually pass policies or direct dollars in a way that inhibits or hurts the Jewish community. I am of the mindset that Zohran Mamdani and his leadership won't necessarily direct dollars that in a way that will hurt the Jewish community, although that's something that's within the purview, not explicitly, but implicitly in the purview of a leader of the city. But I do think that people are looking at his victory in the Democratic mayoral primary as a sign that the campaign to globalize the Intifada has succeeded. And I bring up that phrase because a lot of Jewish people rightfully have a lot of concerns and fears in the aftermath of October 7th. We've seen a spike in anti-Semitic hate crimes, not only here in New York, but across the country. And of course, that affects the Jewish community right here in New York, where there's the largest Jewish population in America. And over the coming weeks and months, we're going to see what kind of extremism Zohran Mamdani will stand up to and will condemn. Yeah. In 2021, I just want to point out, he joined a rally hosted by Within Our Lifetime, a group that has explicitly called for the expulsion of Zionists from New York City, a group that has used the phrase globalize the Intifada quite regularly. And he has never condemned that organization. He has never explicitly distanced himself from that organization. And so when in recent weeks he has tried to walk himself back from the phrase globalize the Intifada, which he has never explicitly used, but he is affiliated with and he has uplifted, we have an obligation, I believe, as Jewish New Yorkers to hold him accountable, to stand up against anti-Semitic extremism wherever it exists, because he not only has power over the purse, he not only has an ability to point other people to significant leadership positions in New York City, he has a bully pulpit. And that bully pulpit in the largest city in the country, one of the most prominent cities in the world, will have widespread ramifications for the Jewish diaspora.
Yeah, I mean, this is a complicated topic because people see that he's associated with these slogans that seem, as a Zionist Jew myself, very dangerous and violent to our people, right? But on the flip side, we have people that are Jewish. We have other mayoral candidates like Brad Lander who are endorsing Mamdani. So as a Jewish person who maybe are liberal with more progressive views, they're thinking, why would we not vote for Mamdani? And I understand why people want to vote for him. His policies, they sound incredible. We all live here. It's unsustainable. We all want lower rent, affordable groceries, childcare. They sound great. But is it possible to be progressive from an economic standpoint, but also be protective of the Jewish people and the population as Jews? Is that possible?
Look, at the same time that Zohran Mamdani won his mayoral election, or the primary for mayor here in New York City, we had a comptroller's race in New York City. It's the second most powerful election, I think, that took place in the Democratic primary in June. And Mark Levine, a Jewish man who speaks fluent Hebrew, who speaks fluent Yiddish, was elected to a position that is going to oversee the city's finances. When I look at what just transpired, I see a city that has been frustrated by its set of economic circumstances, but didn't necessarily vote for Zohran Mamdani, at least in the total of the whole of the voting population didn't vote for Zohran Mamdani because of his alignment with anti-Zionist and potentially his affiliations with anti-Semitic extremists. They voted for him because he spoke about the bread and butter issues that people wake up every single morning and think about. They think about their cost of living, right? They think about their ability to get to work using the MTA. They think about their ability to pay for groceries, etc. And Zohran spoke to those issues. Right. Meanwhile, you had his main opponent in the mayoral primary, Andrew Cuomo, center a lot of his messaging, interestingly, around anti-Semitism and alignment with Israel. And I think a lot of Jewish New Yorkers, while they may perhaps care about those issues, don't wake up every morning thinking primarily about that. Now, we can have a conversation within the Jewish community about what we need to prioritize as voters, but the practical reality is whether you're a conservative Jew, an Orthodox Jew, or a Reform Jew, everyone wakes up in the morning, they think about whether or not they can help their family make ends meet. Right. And Zoran spoke to those issues.
But how feasible are his policies that he's promising New Yorkers?
So this gets into the relationship between the mayor and the state government. So the mayor really can't raise taxes on his own. He can redirect dollars, but to pursue as ambitious of an agenda as Zoran Mamdani wants to pursue, he needs to be able to find funding. And here in New York City right now, up until next year, our city has in part been running on COVID relief funds that all municipalities across the country have had access to. Those expire at the end of 2026. And the objective reality also is that as Trump's big, beautiful bill comes into play, there is going to be an increasing cost burden on municipalities that is going to force New York City to continue to tap into its reserves. And ultimately, between 2027 and 2029, is going to force New York City likely into debt if it doesn't either raise taxes or make significant budget cuts. That makes it really hard for a socialist who's pursuing such an ambitious agenda to actually be able to achieve his agenda over the course of the next 4 years. Do I think it's practical that he's going to be able to achieve his whole agenda? It's highly unlikely. But do I think that he's going to shift the Overton window, or the perception of what's possible in New York City? Absolutely. And I hope that that's done so in a way that's constructive for New Yorkers and also values the safety of all New Yorkers, including Jewish New Yorkers.
Yeah. And I think another important thing to note about this election was, like, I didn't personally know what was going on until 2 weeks prior, right, when my social media was going off the rails. Extremist views on the left, extremist views on the right, don't vote for him, right? So it's this lack of education to the average New Yorker like myself who just doesn't know what's going on in the world of politics unless it's Trump versus Biden. Mm-hmm. So for someone like myself that may be out there that like didn't even vote in the primaries, maybe they're not registered to vote, how do we get those people to act? And how do we get them to be excited and feel like they know what to expect going into November?
So for the Jewish community here in New York City, I think a lot of folks had their political awakening over the past couple of months, whether it was because they were fired up by Zoran Mamdani's campaign or because they're in fear of what he might do as mayor. Yeah. A lot of New Yorkers now are paying attention to the importance of local politics. And over the past year, I would say actually one of the most important deadlines for a lot of folks watching right now was actually in February when there was a deadline to change your party registration. And the reason why I point that part out is because, again, 70% roughly of New Yorkers are registered Democratic voters, which means in November, more likely than not, the Democratic nominee for mayor is going to become or be elected mayor of New York City. So your real voice in the political process here in New York is in the primary that takes place in June. Right. And to participate in that, you need to be a registered Democrat.
There was a lot of confusion in this election with, I'm a registered independent, I'm a registered Republican, can I change my voter status? Mm-hmm. Is that something people will have to change prior to November, or can they do that on election day in November?
For November's sake, anybody can vote, everyone can vote in the election, but for future primaries, including next June's state legislative primaries and the gubernatorial primary that will take place, if people want to have a say in what will predominantly be Democratic primaries, they need to change their registration in advance of February of next year. Okay. And to bring us back to an earlier point, next June's primaries, both for governor and the state legislature, will be a primary that will determine who will be in a position to hold Mamdani accountable should he be elected mayor in January. So next June's primaries are actually quite consequential if you care deeply about or are concerned deeply about Zoran Mamdani's term.
Okay. So I do feel like people are thinking more short term right now than they are long term. So I guess as someone like yourself, like, are you concerned if he is elected? Because can you, I guess, explain like the more long-term effects of this in terms of like what will be coming up in June and what that would mean for his...
So let's just talk about the political reality here in New York City right now. You have Zoran Mamdani, who's the Democratic nominee. You have Curtis Sliwa, who's the Republican nominee. And then you have 3 independents currently slated to be on the ballot. Andrew Cuomo's running, current mayor. Eric Adams is going to be on the ballot. And a lesser-known lawyer, Jim Walden, plans to be on the ballot. the likelihood that Zoran Mamdani, that someone other than Zoran Mamdani wins, I'm going to use a sports analogy here. I kind of equate to LeBron James, to us being down 3-1 and not having LeBron James, or to us being down 28-3 and not having Tom Brady on our side. Like, we don't have the player to win the game right now. And so the reality is Zoran Mamdani is going to be mayor, more likely than not. And so in this reality where Zoran Mamdani is likely to win, assuming nobody drops out, which is possible, but I don't have a crystal ball to predict that. In that scenario, there is a school of thought that Brad Lander, who you mentioned earlier, is pursuing, where it's better to be in have a relationship with Zoran Mamdani than to be adversarial. So he has a listening ear within the Zionist and Jewish community. Now, that's not something that I'm personally pursuing. I don't think that Zoran Mamdani has earned the benefit of our doubt. And at the same time, I am glad that there are Zionist Jews right now who are choosing to have that relationship with Zoran, because I do hope that he moves in a direction where he becomes more attentive to and sympathetic to our concerns. But again, I don't believe he's earned the benefit of our doubt. And right now, I think it's important to think about how we hold him accountable as mayor. And if there are Democratic Jews who choose to vote for Zoran Mamdani in November, they have a heightened obligation to also stand up to him should he continue to affiliate with and or engage with anti-Semitic extremism. So it is a complex moment, and I wish I could provide more hope, but that hope to me comes in the fact that at the same time we are again going to now elect a Jewish comptroller who speaks fluent Hebrew, speaks fluent Yiddish, is going to be in an incredibly powerful position here in New York City. And there are state legislative elections and gubernatorial elections next year where Zoran Mamdani's power can be put in check.
Right. So this is not the end-all, be-all, detrimental election that a lot of people on social media are feeling, I think, right now, which I think you saying that would definitely ease a lot of the concern around this potential.
But we can't accept any affiliations with anti-Semitic extremism whatsoever. And I've seen folks in the Jewish community begin to excuse and accept, and there is no accepting anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism can't be a partisan issue. Anti-Semitism can't be a thing that we excuse for partisan purposes, whether you're on the right or you're on the left. And I think that's my main message to the Jewish community right now, no matter who you're supporting in November, is that we don't excuse anti-Semitism or affiliations with anti-Semitic extremism. I'm not here to call Zoran Mamdani an anti-Semite. I see that he affiliates with anti-Semitism. I see that he has platformed anti-Semitic extremists. And that is a really dangerous place to be in right now in a city that has such a large Jewish population, where we have a leader who seemingly either doesn't take the responsibility of being mayor seriously or doesn't seem to take the safety of the Jewish community seriously. And while he has said that he does, I want to not only see him say that, I want to see him show that through actions and who he affiliates with and who he surrounds himself with. And he has a couple of months ahead and until he's elected into office to really show that he's learning and he's listening. And I hope to see him do that.
Zach, as someone who's an expert in elections and Democratic politics, is this genuinely the end-all be-all? Because from my social media feed, I believe that it is. And I think our news feed's feeding us that this is the end-all be-all.
No, it's not the end-all be-all. Mamdani's not going to be king of New York City. There are checks and balances to be put in place. And that's why in 2026, you have an opportunity, everyone has an opportunity to show up and vote. They need to make sure that they're registered, ideally registered as Democrats for the New York City primary next year. They should go get 15 friends to go register as Democrats in New York City for the primaries coming up. And they need to go meet local elected officials. They need to uplift an alternative vision to New York City than the one that Mamdani is presenting. And that's the message that we're going to send. That's the power that we're going to build. And I find it incredibly hot when people show up and vote. So I hope that people go do that.
This is true. I have heard a saying recently is don't date people who don't vote. Do you believe in that statement?
I've gone on a couple dates with people who don't vote, but I haven't gone on many second dates with people who don't vote.
Right.
So.
Yeah, voting is sexy, and let's make voting sexy again. Good learning lesson for us all. I do want to go off on more of a personal tangent. I feel like a lot of us Jews who once thought of ourselves as liberal and Democrats are just having this political identity crisis right now. Yeah. It's do we identify more with our Judaism or do we identify more with our political beliefs? And it seems like there can't be both. And that seems it's a really hard balance. So how do you, I guess, like vote based off of like both, taking both into consideration if maybe they're not both a priority?
Look, we're not a monolith as a Jewish community. We carry a lot of different identities, perspectives, priorities. But I think one thing for me that's fundamental is that I will always stand up for my community and counter the extremism that targets our community. And that does not just exist on one side of the aisle right now. Again, as I think I mentioned earlier, anti-Semitism cannot become a partisan issue. And the minute we make it that, the minute we prey on people's fears for partisan intent, for partisan goals, is the minute the Jewish community starts to lose. And we have an obligation, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, to stand up to those extremes. I'm a Democrat. And while I've spent the last 5 years standing up to what I perceive to be right-wing, anti-democratic, authoritarian extremism, where I see a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric being spewed from the right, I also recognize my role as a Democrat to stand up to that within my own party. And I think a lot of people are struggling with their political identities right now because their Zionism seemingly has felt complicated, or people have been ostracized for being Zionists. But what we can't allow to happen is that we also become ostracized just because we are Jews. And so I've taken it upon myself in my personal capacity to fight anti-Semitic extremism. But I hope that people don't allow this percolating anti-Semitic extremism to be something that allows for them to abandon or abdicate their values. So much of what you vote on, so much of what we all stand for are Jewish values. They're rooted in our Judaism. The whole tikkun olam, like repair the world, we have an obligation to hold true to those values and not let a party or extremists within a party take that away from us.
So Zach, you mentioned before how Cuomo and Adams were both running on this idea of anti-Semitism and that being a primary priority for them, which obviously as a Jewish voter is great to see, but how can you run a campaign just solely off of one issue by trying to get just the Jewish vote? Like, why has that not been successful in the past?
You know, Barack Obama, when he ran for president, said, I'm not running to represent a black America, a white America, a red America, a blue America. I'm running to represent the United States of America. And when you run, I think what you take away from that, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, is the idea that you need to run on issues that unite people. And so just running on combating anti-Semitism or standing up to anti-Zionism is not the uniting force that you need to win an election, even in New York City, where 13% of registered voters in a Democratic primary are Jews. And so while it mobilized 26% of the overall electorate, by some accounts, to turn out and be Jewish, it's not enough. And by the way, it's not even enough within the Jewish community to run on those issues. So I think that what we've learned in this election is that running, even in the most Jewish city in America, on anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, or combating those two things, it is not enough to win.
It's not enough. It's not enough, yeah. And just getting back to that and like who people should be voting for in November. I don't need you to name a candidate, but I think a lot of people are confused now with, Adams, with Cuomo now being back in, and Mamdani. Like, who should Jewish people be voting for? People are confused.
Well, first things first, people need to be registered to vote and make sure that their friends and family are registered to vote. So I think a fine pledge is for everyone to try to register to vote by Rosh Hashanah. And if not, they should repent for their sins on Yom Kippur, because we need every single Jewish voter in New York City to exercise their right. We do live in a democracy, and it's not just this election, it's going to be about future elections too, to really stand up for our community, to stand up for our values. And that's what I encourage folks to do when they go and vote, is vote their values at the voting box on November 4th. And by the way, the deadline to register to vote is October 25th. But I'm setting the deadline for the Jewish community as Rosh Hashanah. Like, we got to get ahead of the game.
These are good guidelines.
Yeah.
Yes, people will totally understand and resonate with that.
I think what's really important is that we don't allow this election to divide us as a community. We need to come together. And what I hope is that folks who've been awakened by this moment, they're welcomed by those who recognized the challenges beforehand. We need to work together to build back our community's political power here in New York. Recognize that our community is diverse, but be united in standing up against anti-Semitic threats wherever they exist, and make it known that it will not be tolerated. This result is not about Mamdani's affiliation with anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic extremism. It must not be. And if it is, then we must stand up to it with force. But the practical reality is Mamdani ran a campaign against a handful of candidates who were subpar at best and horrific at worst in their campaigning. And they might have stood on the right side when it comes to anti-Semitism and standing up to anti-Zionism, but they weren't running on campaigns that spoke to the average voter here in the New York City primary and the Democratic electorate. And so what I really hope any Jewish activist, whether they're a social media influencer, a political advocate, do not use this as a moment to divide our community. Use it as a moment to bring us together, because we cannot afford to allow this extremism to divide us any further.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Zach. I think that's absolutely the message we should be getting across at a time when Zionists, anti-Zionists, even as Jews within our own community feel very, very divided. Really, and it's really difficult to find a place and find that identity outside of our Judaism right now. So I thank you for coming on here.
Stand on principle. If people stand on principle, I think they'll be proud of who they are and proud of the city that they help create by registering to vote, voting, and supporting great candidates who uphold our values.
Definitely. Well, thank you for your time today, Zach.
Thank you, Kayla.
Appreciate it, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah.